Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be diving into something that's super relevant if you're prepping for UPSC mains and prelims.
Yeah.
We're talking about India's potential to be a global leader in science and technology.
Right.
And, it's a hot topic these days, especially for current affairs. So let's unpack it.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing here is that India kind of seems to be caught in a bit of a contradiction.
Yeah.
We produce a ton of STEM grads,
Right.
second only to China, actually.
Wow.
But then when it comes to real innovation, we seem to be lagging behind a bit.
Yeah, it's like having all the ingredients you need to make an amazing dish, but somehow not quite getting it right. We're looking at this today from a recent Hindustan Times article, and they highlight a pretty stark comparison right off the bat. India's R&D spending as a percentage of GDP is just 0.65%.
Right.
Now compare that with China, which is at 2.43%.
Huge difference.
Huge difference. So for our UPSC aspirants out there, why should this difference even matter to you?
Well, think of it this way. Robust R&D is really the engine that drives economic growth.
Okay.
It fuels innovation, it increases productivity, and ultimately it kind of determines whether a nation can compete on the global stage.
Got it.
And this connects directly to some of the key themes you'll find in the UPSC syllabus, especially in economics, things like industrial development, escaping the middle income trap, and achieving sustainable growth.
Okay, so strong R&D equals strong economy.
Yeah.
But what does that actually look like in the real world?
Well, let's take South Korea, for example.
Okay.
Back in the 70s, they were in a similar spot to where India is now, but they decided to boost their R&D spending, taking it from something like 0.4% of GDP to a pretty solid 2.5%.
Okay.
And what happened? Within a couple of decades, they went from a developing nation to a global economic powerhouse.
Wow. So they basically invested their way to the top.
Pretty much.
But is that a model that India could actually replicate?
Well, it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
And then you have the case of China. Their economic transformation over the last few decades has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
And a huge factor in that growth has been their increase in R&D spending,
Good.
which went from a tiny 0.6% of GDP in the late 90s to over 2.4% today. So there's a bit of a pattern here.
Right.
Invest in R&D, fuel innovation, and you'll likely see your economy take off.
That's a pretty compelling argument.
Yeah.
But if it's so straightforward, why hasn't India really followed suit?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
The article does point out some interesting contrasts in India's approach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
India's made some pretty impressive strides, particularly in defense and space.
Right.
Take our missile technology, for instance. Programs like Agni and BrahMos are some real achievements.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, we've kind of lagged behind in other crucial areas like, semiconductor manufacturing.
So we can build missiles, but we can't make the chips that power our smartphones.
Right.
That seems a bit backwards.
It does. And this actually points to a bigger issue.
There's a certain risk aversion in the Indian corporate world. A lot of companies find it easier and less risky to just import technology rather than trying to develop it themselves.
Yeah, and I guess it's also about where startups and businesses choose to focus their energy.
Right.
They tend to gravitate towards sectors like IT and e-commerce where the returns are faster and more predictable.
Right.
As opposed to deep tech innovation, which takes longer and involves more risk.
Precisely. And that's one of the key challenges specific to India that this article really dives into.
So it seems like a combination of things is kind of holding India back from really reaching its full potential in R&D.
Right.
But is there a way to turn things around?
Well, the article does offer some potential solutions.
Okay.
It argues pretty strongly for a shift towards a university-led research model, and they use the example of Stanford and its close ties to Silicon Valley.
So tapping into that brain power in our universities and creating those links with industry could be a game changer.
It could absolutely. Stanford's research ecosystem played a huge role in the early growth of Silicon Valley. It created this dynamic feedback loop between academia and industry.
Right.
And we need to figure out how to create that same kind of synergy in India.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it probably takes more than just structural changes, right? There
Yeah.
has to be like a cultural shift as well.
Definitely.
The Hindustan Times article really emphasizes that, especially for you UPSC folks.
Right.
It talks about the need to foster a culture of risk-taking, particularly when it comes to early-stage research.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. It's about shifting that mindset instead of always seeing risk as something to be feared. We need to start seeing it as a necessary part of the whole innovation process.
Yeah.
It's kind of like exploring uncharted territory, you know? You might not always find what you're looking for, but those explorations can lead to unexpected discoveries and breakthroughs.
Right.
That wouldn't happen if you just played it safe all the time.
That's a great point, and it ties in perfectly with what the article says about needing a more efficient and streamlined approach to project management.
Yeah.
They actually draw a parallel with DARPA, the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency.
Right.
So for those of us who might not be familiar with DARPA, what makes their model so effective?
Well, DARPA is really known for its flexible and agile approach to funding and managing research projects.
Okay.
They're very focused on getting outcomes, but they also allow for a certain degree of experimentation and even failure.
Right.
They understand that not every research project is going to lead to a major breakthrough.
So it's about finding that sweet spot,
Right.
having a clear strategic direction, but also giving researchers the freedom to explore different avenues.
Exactly, and that's where efficient project management comes in.
Okay.
The article suggests that India's Anusandhan National Research Foundation, or ANRF, could learn a lot from DARPA's model. And this would involve having dedicated program managers who have the expertise to really guide and evaluate research projects, transparent funding mechanisms, and a strong leadership team that can make quick decisions and has a clear vision for the future.
It sounds like a pretty big change from how things are done in India right now.
It would be a significant shift.
But maybe that's what we need to really see some progress. And speaking of change, the article also talks about this urgent need for increased R&D investment,
Right.
especially from the private sector.
You're hitting on another crucial point. In 2020-21, the private sector only contributed about 36.4% of the total R&D funding in India.
That's pretty low.
Yeah, it is, especially considering how big and how much potential the Indian economy has.
So what can be done to boost private sector investment in R&D? Does the government have a role to play here?
Absolutely. The government needs to create an environment that actually incentivizes the private sector to participate in R&D. You know, things like tax breaks for companies that invest in research grants for collaborative projects between universities and industry, and even streamlining regulatory processes to make it easier for businesses to engage in research activities.
So it's kind of a win-win situation, right? The government provides the support and the incentives, and the private sector steps up with the necessary investment.
Exactly. And the good news is there are already some positive developments happening.
Okay.
The article mentions this 1 lakh crore innovation fund that was announced in the 2025-26 union budget.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
If that funding is actually managed well and strategically, it could be a huge boost for deep tech R&D in India.
Yeah, that's huge. And that's definitely something our UPSC aspirants should take note of.
Absolutely.
You know, staying updated on these policy initiatives related to R&D shows that you're on top of current events.
Right.
And that's a valuable thing, not just for mains, but for prelims, too.
You're absolutely right. Remember, the UPSC exam isn't just about memorizing facts and figures. It's about understanding the context, the challenges, and the potential solutions. That's what really sets apart those who are truly well-informed.
So let's do a quick recap for our listeners.
Sure.
Especially for those getting ready for the UPSC exams. What are the key takeaways that they should be focusing on?
Okay, so first and foremost, it's understanding the crucial role R&D plays in driving economic growth and, a nation's ability to compete globally. This is a fundamental concept with implications across the entire UPSC syllabus.
Yeah, it's not just about science and technology.
Well,
it's about economic policy, industrial development, and India's position in the world.
Exactly. Secondly, you need to be aware of the specific challenges that India's R&D ecosystem faces. We talked about low investment, the over-reliance on government funding, the disconnect between universities and industry, and that lack of risk-taking. Understanding those challenges is key to finding effective solutions.
Okay, and that brings us to our third takeaway, which is knowing the key reforms being proposed and implemented to address these challenges.
Exactly.
Things like increasing private sector investment, promoting a university-led research model, streamlining project management, and fostering that culture of risk-taking.
Exactly. But remember, for our UPSC aspirants, it's not just about passively absorbing this information. You have to critically analyze it and form your own informed opinions.
The UPSC exam isn't about rote learning.
No, it's not.
It's about showing critical thinking, analytical skills, and being able to apply your knowledge to these real-world scenarios.
And that's where those aha moments come in.
Right.
It's about going beyond just the surface level.
Right.
And extracting those little nuggets of insight that show you truly understand the topic.
So, for example, instead of just saying that India needs to increase its R&D spending,
right,
an aspirant could go deeper and actually explain how this could be done.
Exactly. You could talk about specific policies to incentivize private sector investment. You know, the benefits of adopting a university-led research model,
Right.
or the role of risk-taking in driving innovation.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of insights that make your answers stand out
Yeah.
and show those examiners that you can think critically and connect the dots.
And it's those connections that often lead to the most interesting insights.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the article mentions that India has historically focused heavily on certain sectors like defense,
Right.
which has led to some interesting contrasts.
Yes. It's fascinating how India has made these remarkable advancements in missile technology, but lags behind in some other areas, like semiconductor manufacturing, for example.
Right.
It shows that we need a more balanced approach to R&D, where we're not just focusing on a few specific areas, but spreading our resources and expertise strategically.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Like, we've perfected how to build these high-tech missiles, but haven't quite figured out how to make the chips that power all our devices. It really shows the need for diversification and strategic planning when it comes to R&D.
Definitely, we need to find those areas where India has the potential to be a global leader, and then make sure we have the resources and expertise there.
So it's not just about the amount we invest in R&D.
Right.
It's also about how and where we choose to focus our efforts.
Absolutely. And this is where understanding things like the middle income trap becomes so important,
Yeah.
especially for UPSC aspirants.
Right.
That term refers to when developing countries get kind of stuck at a certain level of income and can't break through to high income status.
Now, that's a concept that often comes up in UPSC economics papers.
It does.
So how does R&D relate to the middle income trap?
Well, robust R&D is seen as a key way to escape the middle income trap.
Oh.
By investing in innovation and technology, countries can boost productivity,
Right.
create new industries,
Right.
and move up the value chain,
Yeah.
which leads to higher incomes and more economic growth.
So it's not just about catching up with developed countries. It's about becoming a leader in those new technologies.
Exactly. And this brings us back to another important point that the article makes.
Okay.
India needs to do more than just copy existing technology.
Right.
We need to truly innovate and create our own solutions.
So move beyond just being followers and actually
Yeah.
become creators.
Exactly. And this requires a real shift in mindset from just adapting existing technologies to actively creating new ones that address India's specific needs and challenges.
Makes sense. It's about using our strengths
Yeah.
and using innovation to solve problems that are unique to the Indian context.
Right. And this is where the government's role is crucial.
Okay.
They need to create policies and initiatives that actually encourage this kind of homegrown innovation and not just rely on imported technologies.
So it sounds like we need a multi-pronged approach.
We do.
Increased investment, a culture of risk-taking, and a supportive policy environment.
You got it. And it's this combination that will ultimately determine whether India can truly live up to its potential as a global leader in science and technology.
It's definitely a complex issue,
Yeah,
but a conversation definitely worth having,
for sure.
especially for anyone interested in India's future.
And as always, we encourage our listeners to really delve deeper into this topic.
Yeah.
And don't just take our word for it.
No.
Check out the Hindustan Times article.
Right.
We've got a link in the show notes.
Yeah, packed with lots of great insights
It is.
that will really deepen your understanding. It really highlights the challenges and the opportunities that are out there for India. And speaking of opportunities, let's bring this back to our UPSC aspirants.
Right.
How can you guys connect all of this to the UPSC syllabus
Yeah.
and actually use it in your answers?
Right.
What's the takeaway for you?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Imagine you're answering a question about India's economic growth prospects, or maybe its role in the global technology landscape.
Yeah.
You could weave in these insights that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
You know about R&D,
Okay.
highlighting the need for more investment,
Right.
the importance of collaboration between industry and academia,
Right.
and the strategic value of taking risks in scientific research.
So you're showing the examiners that you're not just stating facts.
Exactly.
You're actually analyzing, connecting at the dots and understanding the nuances.
Absolutely. And remember, the UPSC is looking for candidates who can not only analyze the present, but also think about the future.
Right.
So think about the long-term implications of India's R&D landscape.
Yep.
How could a stronger R&D ecosystem change India's economy and its place in the world?
That's a great point. It's about seeing that bigger picture. And here's a question to leave you with.
Okay.
One that links back to the UPSC syllabus and gets you thinking a bit more deeply. What specific policies could India put in place to really encourage the private sector to invest more in R&D?
That's a fantastic question.
It is, right?
Yeah. It's the kind of question that UPSC examiners love.
Right.
Because it makes you think critically, consider different viewpoints,
Right.
and come up with creative solutions.
Yeah.
There's no one right answer.
Yeah.
But just thinking about it will help you understand how complex this issue really is.
Well, folks, that wraps up another deep dive.
It does.
We've explored the challenges and opportunities in India's R&D ecosystem.
Yeah.
A topic that's important not just for UPSC aspirants,
Right.
but for anyone who's interested in seeing India become a global leader in science and technology.
We encourage you to keep exploring this topic.
Yeah.
Make sure you check out the full Hindustan Times article.
Absolutely.
We've linked it in the show notes.
Yeah.
It's got a ton of great information.
And if you found this deep dive helpful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth discussions on all sorts of interesting topics.
We love hearing from you guys.
We do.
So leave your questions or thoughts in the comments below.
Until next time, happy studying.